Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another wonderful Cook Along Live. I'm your host, Rob Sogamonian. Tonight, we're going to be making some tomato bisque soup. I don't know about where you guys are. I'm in California. We have pretty light weather generally when it comes to the winter. Yes, I hear you, Kat. What? I'm live. I can't. You're throwing off my groove. I know. Yes, go away. Anyway, we have some weird, really kind of like light, easy weather, all things considered, when we're talking about winter time. However, this year we've gotten a lot of rain, and we're kind of weather wusses, so that makes me a little bit sad and kind of crave some comfort food. So decided we'd put together something a little bit warm and fuzzy, like my cat. Kitty, go away. So we're going to be making tomato bisque and grilled cheese Sammys today. Got all the ingredients out here, and I've got a bowl and a plate out. The reason I got the bowl and the plate out is because the first thing we're going to do is turn on our oven to basically as low as it'll go, 170, 200, somewhere around there. And we're just going to throw these in there and let them kind of warm up while we're making the soup. So go ahead and get that going. And make sure you have something to pick those things up with, because they are going to be fairly warm when you take them out of the oven. But we want those to kind of preheat so that when we put our soup into them, they're nice and warm and ready to go. Yeah, Meow Beast is walking around. I don't know why. She's gotten plenty of snacks today, so she just wants to be hanging out. Hi, cat. All right, let's get started with our tomato bisque soup. Go ahead and grab an onion. I don't know if you guys are looking at the chat or not, but one of my friends locally said that he's getting some teary eyes, so I've got a solution. Go grab some of these chemical glasses from your local hardware store. Makes chopping onions tear-free. Now, you all probably know how I chop onions, but just in case you don't, we're going to go ahead and cut them top down from the root down to the top. And then we're going to cut once or twice horizontally, like so, just about, I'd say 90% of the way through. Lay your hand flat along the top so that you don't cut yourself. And you're just really holding it in place. You don't have to like smash down on it. You just want a little bit of pressure to keep it in one spot as you cut horizontally. Then we're going to turn it this way. Make a couple of vertical slices through. Don't worry if you have little bits that kind of come off. That's normal. And I need to sharpen my knives because they're starting to get a little bit sticky on these. You don't need to chop this onion super fine. We're going to be putting it into the pot over here. And with the pot, they're all going to cook down. So go ahead and just chop them up as fine as you can get them, or like a quarter dice, basically, quarter-inch dice. Don't worry too much about getting them super, super fine. You don't need them in this case. We're just going to chop right through the onion. And then again, you guys have seen me chop at least 62 different kinds of onions on this show because we're at episode 62. We're just going to put a couple of extra slices into these long bits. And then just use up all of the onion. And then all we're left with is this little itty-bitty bit for waste, if you want to call it waste. I just throw it in my compost bin, and then I take it out and use it as compost in my garden. There's one half of the onion. I'm going to get the other half chopped up as well. Again, just a little bit of pressure to keep it from moving around. Cut about 90% of the way through. And the reason we don't cut all the way through is because if you totally separate the layers, the thing's going to fall apart when you start doing your vertical cuts. So you just want to cut most of the way through. The root will hold the onion together. And then when you cut down vertically, it's the same thing. You're only cutting 90% of the way through. You're not going all the way to the end, all the way through it. That way the onion stays together as you're dicing. And by the way, these goggles are pretty good. Nice investment. And we're just going to chop right through the onion vertically now. And then same thing, just at the end. A couple of extra chops. Maybe one or two additional little slices if we need to. And then we will use up all of our onion in our soup. And then if you get to this point and you notice that maybe you don't have cuts going all the way back to the root, go ahead and put in a couple of little extra cuts. And then you can really get pretty much all the way up to that root end. All right, I'm going to go ahead and slide the onion just kind of up a little bit. I want to chop up my celery next. Got a couple of really good looking ribs of celery here. I'm just going to take the bottoms off right where they start to kind of flare out. Again, compost bin. They make a great addition to your compost. And then I just kind of go up to wherever this first knuckle is, where the kind of leaves branch out. And I do just take those off. You don't really need to. I just think it's easier to cut things when they're like this. And now that my onions are cut, I can take off the goggles. I'm actually crying because I'm so excited for Cook Along Live. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Drake. Good to see you guys too. All right. Celery is pretty easy to chop. I cut it in half first. Then I just cut each half in half. And then if you really want to, you can keep going into halves and halves and halves. In this case, again, we're cooking it down. It's going to kind of get smaller anyway, so I don't need to worry too much about making it microscopic, but that's the easiest way to cut celery. Again, we'll just go in half, then in half again, like so. And one last half for this last piece of celery. And then we'll just line it all up. And we'll just start dicing it. Now, another thing you can do with celery, I mean, these are some pretty long strands here. You can absolutely cut this in half. And then that makes this more manageable for your hand. And as we mentioned in many of my videos, the way that I cut, I just kind of make a little claw like that. And then I use the back of my knuckle to kind of guide the knife down. And I just kind of slide my hand, inch it back after every slice. And then you just keep your thumb behind this wall that your fingers are creating, and it's very, very difficult to cut yourself. It happens. I've still cut myself doing it because you get a little too comfortable and your thumb slips out, or you flatten out a finger, and it can happen, but very few and far between. Especially versus, holding stuff like this or like this, where the corner of your finger is just sitting there waiting for the edge of the knife. Claw makes it nice and easy. There we go. Perfect. So you can see that this is about an equal part of onion to celery. Doesn't have to be. Just get it close. And if you really like kind of the oniony flavor, you can always add more. Onion or celery. I meant to say celery. If you like the celery flavor, that kind of anise flavor, and you want to add a little bit more, go for it. It's your soup. We're going to go ahead and get this pot going. I don't want it too high. I just want it like medium high. Maybe if you have an induction or something like that, 325. We want to get it kind of sweating, but we don't want to roast it or brown anything. We just want things to kind of get translucent and sweat a little bit. Add a bit of olive oil. I'm using extra virgin. Again, I like the richness of that flavor. Just set that over there. I'm going to let this heat up just a little bit. And then while I'm waiting for that, I guess I can start with my garlic. Just going to go ahead and get it out on the cutting board. Give each one a nice little love tap. And essentially what that does is just flattens them out. Makes it easy to dice them, especially for something like this, where we don't necessarily, again, need them to be super finely chopped. We just need them to be cut up. Just like that. Now, since I'm using an induction burner, my oil is nice and hot already. I'm going to go ahead and just scoop all of my onions and celery in. And you should absolutely hear that sizzle. But it should be a soft sizzle like this, a nice little gentle sizzle. You don't want it to be loud and like splattering. That's too hot. Get that in, scrape the last bits up with our knife. There we go. And what we're going to want to do on top of this is add just a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. The salt will help start drawing the moisture out of these and cooking off, which helps to kind of sweat them out a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. Also adds flavor. I'm going to put a little bit of pepper in right now as well. Swirl it around just a bit. And you might as well get a spatula out, just so that you can stir it occasionally. We pretty much want to cook this off for about, I don't know, anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes until the vegetables are translucent-ish, starting to become translucent. Switch back to our garlic. It's already kind of flattened, so I'm just going to cut it long ways like so. And I'm just going to cut all of the cloves long ways first. And yeah, we smashed them, so they're kind of going to be diced a little bit, but don't worry too much about that. We'll come in and give them a final cross cut in just a second. There we go. And if it's something like this where they're very, very small strands, I usually just kind of use the back of the knife or the flat end of the knife to help kind of turn them. And then I'll just cross cut them like this. Again, I'm not looking to get something super, super fine because all of this is going to get cooked down and become super soft, and we're going to blend it anyway. But this just gets more flavor in and helps it cook down faster. There we go. Give this a quick stir. You can see that the onions are starting to get a little bit softer, get a little bit less opaque, a little bit more translucent. And that's exactly what we're looking for. Give that another little bit to cook down. I'm going to go wash my garlicky hands off. Join me at the sink. So we are also going to be using a little bit of the burner behind me, just to kind of keep the soup simmering while we work on some grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm going to show you how to do 2 different styles of grilled cheese sandwich. One with regular old school classic American cheese, really melty, yummy cheese, and then another version with cheddar. I like both. Just kind of depends on the day and how much work I want to put in. The American cheese version is a lot easier. But it really just kind of depends what you're looking for. All right, we're getting some good steam off of this bad boy. Yep, sink cam has been upgraded. I'm looking to upgrade the overhead cam because it appears that it only does 1080 interlaced, which is why you're seeing those kind of weird artifacts when things move around. I looked into the manual for it, and it just seems that that's a limitation on that camera. Apparently, I got a new capture card, and the new capture card isn't able to like upscale it into 1080p for some reason. So I just got to get a new camera, I think, or figure out a way to get one of my GoPros to work up there. Kind of weird. We'll figure it out. All right, so let's go ahead back over here. Your onions should be mostly translucent. You don't want any browning on them. You just want them to kind of be sweating down. And that's what they should be doing. If you have some browning, it's not a huge deal. Like, you're not going to ruin the soup because you browned your onions, but you want to keep everything kind of normal, not browned. I'm just going to turn this down to like 300. I'm going to toss my garlic in. I'm putting 4 cloves in. My ingredients list said 3 cloves, but I like garlic, so I'm just adding an extra clove. And there we go. Go ahead and stir the garlic through. You don't want to burn the garlic. The garlic will actually get an acrid flavor if it gets burned. So you just want to kind of stir it around for about a minute before we go on to our next step. And it smells amazing in here, as usual. One of my favorite things about hosting this cook along live, I get to smell everything and eat everything after I'm done cooking it. And let me tell you, it's pretty amazing to be here. At some point this year, I will start having guests back over for the cook along live so that they can hang out, fill some of the dead time when we're just watching something kind of simmer with conversation and things like that. But yeah, I love that aspect of this for sure. So we can see that our onions, celery, garlic, it's all cooked. We don't have any browning in there, which is perfect. That's what we're not looking for. We don't want any, so this is great. We are going to go ahead and add in our 4 cups or 1 quart, same thing, of whatever stock you're using. I made a delicious turkey stock at Thanksgiving with all the turkey carcass that I had left over. Just going to take this over to the sink really quick. And because of that, it's just been kind of chilling in my freezer. With all the leftovers from the turkey, I use every bit, make a beautiful stock, and then I don't have to go to the store. I can just use that. I do the same thing when I'm cooking a chicken, like if I'm doing a roast chicken. You have stock, just make it. It's super simple to do. We're back over here. Let's give this a stir so things don't stick to the bottom. And we're going to let this kind of come up to a simmer. And we are going to turn this back up to like medium-high to kind of speed the process along. While we're waiting on that, let's talk about bread. So when you're making grilled cheese sandwiches, everybody tends to have their favorite kind of bread. I like heartier breads. So I've got a nice sourdough that I'm going to be using. This is a local company. Actually, I think they're baked in San Francisco, which is awesome. Wonderful, wonderful sourdough bread. It's nice and robust. I also have a white bread in here somewhere, and I'm not going to use the white bread. For me, even though you get a nice toasty exterior on a white bread tends to be a little bit too soft. It's got too much moisture in it. So even though you'll toast the outside, the rest of the bread will be super soft, and it almost comes across and tastes a little bit mushy. I like sourdough a little bit better because the bread itself is a little bit more robust. It's got a nice chew to it. And so when you're crunching into it, it's crunchy, it's thick. For me, it's more satisfying. However, you do you. Whatever type of bread you like best, that's what you should be using for your sandwiches. Go ahead and get this coming up to the boil. It's starting to steam just a bit. I'm going to go ahead and add my canned tomatoes. Now, I'm just using crushed tomatoes. I believe, because Cento brings in the San Marzano tomatoes, that these are crushed San Marzanos. They tend to be a little bit sweeter than just regular tomatoes or regular vine-ripened tomatoes. And canned, all of the flavor and everything is preserved in the can. When they process them, everything is preserved. These are generally going to taste better. Or, if you want to make sure that you're using San Marzano, because, again, this just says crushed tomatoes, you can always get a can of regular San Marzano tomatoes. Use a potato masher. Just mash them up yourself. Crush them yourself. And you can use those. That way you know that you're getting the sweetest type of tomato for a tomato or a tomato bisque soup. Go ahead and pour this in. I'm just going to kind of scrape down the sides with my spatula. You can also reserve a little bit of stock if you want, and kind of rinse out the inside of this can to get every last bit of tomato out. Really, it's up to you and how much work you want to put in. For me, tonight, this is good enough. I mean, that's like 90% of what's in the can. And we're going to scrape that off the bottom. Yep, fire roasted tomatoes are also a great option. Now, I did see a video where America's Test Kitchen took those and actually caramelized them in the oven. They said that it was closer to sun-dried tomatoes. You may need to add a little bit of sugar or a little bit more sugar at the end to get the sweetness up with either sun-dried or the roasted tomatoes that you're using, just because a lot of the sugar's been concentrated but also evaporated off. So That might be the only thing that you're going to see is you might need a little bit of extra sugar at the end. But the depth of flavor should be there. Should be wonderful. I'm going to take the can over to the recycling. I've got a little recycling can over there. And at this point, I'm going to let this come up to a simmer. And I'm going to add the paprika and the cayenne pepper. So the cayenne is a smaller, it's about a 1/4 teaspoon. This will give you a nice little kick. So if you don't want quite as much spice, maybe do 1/8 of a teaspoon and then adjust from there. And then the smoked paprika just gives it a nice kind of roasty flavor. Get those right in. And grab a spoon and do some tasting. And we will adjust for seasoning at this point. Yeah, I mean, it should come out just fine. And tasting at the end is absolutely what you want. You actually want to taste this kind of as you're cooking it throughout, because you want to adjust the seasoning as it's reducing, as it's doing everything. Mm-hmm. Now that's a good tomato soup. The bisque part comes a little bit later. We're going to wait for this to come up to the simmer. And then once it comes up to the simmer, we're going to put in our rice. And we're going to, in my case, transfer it over to my burner so I can let it just kind of simmer for about 20 to 40 minutes. It really depends on when the rice is cooked. While this is simmering down, we're going to go ahead and do our toasted cheese sandwiches. Now, speaking of sourdough, I've also lived, like in Georgia, when I was living there for a couple of years. When I would go and get sourdough bread, it would always be really, really like moist. It would be a bread that was not super dry, and it actually lacked a little bit of that chew. So if you can't find bread that is kind of chewy and make for a good like grilled cheese sandwich, you can always let it kind of sit out for a little bit and dry out just a little. You don't have to let it go stale, but letting it sit out for maybe 2 hours before you start cooking with it will dry it out to the point where it should get a little bit more chewy. So that's a quick tip for you if you live in an area where maybe it's difficult to find a nice chewy, robust bread for like a toasted cheese sandwich or something like that. All right, we're just starting to get to the simmer. I'm going to go ahead and stir in my rice. Now what the rice does, and this is super interesting, you can make a tomato bisque soup by making like a roux. Taking the vegetables, adding a little bit of flour, because we already have some oil in there, and kind of mixing it up so that the flour then thickens the sauce. However, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to kind of taste a little bit floury or doughy or a little bit grainy. The rice will actually accomplish a very similar effect, but it'll thicken the soup and keep it super smooth. So a really cool little thing, and it's actually a requirement if you want to call something a bisque. It needs rice to thicken it and cream for the additional little creamy flavor. All right, so we got a little simmer going on right here. We've added our rice. I'm going to go ahead and get a burner on and just move the pot over, and then we'll start talking toasted cheese sandwiches. There we go. Get this transferred over real quick. It should continue to simmer, which it is. Let's turn down the temp on that a bit. Now, the downside to this is you don't want this to go for too long, because as the soup is cooking and the rice is starting to absorb some of the moisture, and we're cooking it uncovered, it is going to evaporate and it's going to thicken a little bit. So don't let it go too long. You should probably set a timer for about 20 minutes. Check it, see if the rice is cooked through. If not, let it go for another 10 minutes. Check it. If the rice is cooked through, great, you're done. If the rice still isn't cooked through, okay, cool. Keep it going. Maybe you need to add a little bit extra stock, or maybe you need to add a little bit of water if it's starting to thicken up too much. Obviously, if you add a little bit more stock, you'll have a little bit more depth of flavor there. But if you add water, you'll just kind of thin it out without adding any flavor. Now you can actually, if you add too much water, reduce the flavor because you'll start legitimately just thinning it out. So you don't want to do that either. So let's talk toasted cheese sandwiches or grilled cheese, whichever you want to call it. If you want to add things to your toasted cheese sandwich or your grilled cheese sandwich, like prosciutto, which I love doing, you can't technically call it a grilled cheese. I don't make the rules. I'm just explaining how it goes. Personally, I still call it a grilled cheese. I don't care. It's a grilled cheese sandwich. It also happens to have prosciutto in it or whatever herbs you're putting in it or whatever. That being said, there are some purists out there who will get super upset with you if that's what you do. So toasted cheese sandwich just kind of covers everything. Now, for the bread, we're using a sourdough. I never get pre-sliced bread when I'm making a grilled cheese or a toasted cheese sandwich. And the reason being, every single pre-sliced bread that I've ever purchased from a store has been sliced to like a 1/4 inch thick. And that is super, super thin. It's going to toast very quickly. You're not going to have a nice, satisfying thing to bite into, and it's kind of disappointing. If that's all you can find, I'm sorry, that's what you got to deal with. If that's what you like, cool. You do you. Personally, I like grabbing a loaf of something, or if I'm really feeling adventurous, baking a loaf myself of something, and then cutting slices that are about, I'd say like 3/4 of an inch thick. I want a nice thick sandwich. I want a nice thick bit of bread. And I always cut mine at a slight angle. Take off the heel. And we're going to go for like that, 3/4 of an inch thick. So that's a nice thick piece of bread for a sandwich. See if we switch over here. You can see that that's a good slice of bread. I'm going to make sure that I also keep them in order. So this is the bottom slice now. I'm going to set it there. And the next slice is going to be the top slice. I'm going to cut it about the same thickness. And the reason that I do it this way is because then I know that they're going to fit together perfectly with the cheese inside. If you do this, now you got 2 pieces of bread, and you can see that there's a little bit of an overlap here, and if I flip it around, there's a big overlap over here. I don't like that. Maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but I like keeping things kind of in order. Oh God, and now I messed it up. There we go. So I like keeping them in order. That way I know that they fit, and I know that when I add cheese or whatever to them, they're going to sit and they're going to adhere, and I'm going to have edges that are uniform all the way around the sandwich. We're actually going to make 2 grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm going to show you 2 different styles of how to do this. One is with the classic American cheese, and one we're actually going to grate a little bit of cheddar and do a little bit of a cheddar cheese on the inside. I'll show you what the differences are there. Ancient, debate of grilled cheese versus melt, 100%. Grandfather's advice after I sliced my finger cutting a loaf of bread, Allison, you should always buy sliced bread. Okay, I mean, fair enough. That is, I can't argue with that. That being said, if you're using the claw method to cut all your bread, it's the same thing. Very, very difficult to cut your hand. Now, if you're holding the bread loaf like this when you're cutting it, yes, I could see how you might nick yourself. But if you're always doing this, doesn't matter what you're cutting, very difficult to cut yourself. So here we go. We're going to cut 4 slices of bread. This is one of the possible downsides to buying your own loaf, and that is getting a full-on hole through the slice of bread. I can see you. This piece of bread actually won't work for this. I might use it to make like a toast tomorrow. I'm not going to throw it away, but I'm going to set those 2 pieces aside. This piece is where that bubble, the back of the bubble is right here, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I'm just going to make sure that I cut it so that I have a flat side. There we go. And then same with this one. Just double checking to make sure. Perfect. You don't want your cheese because it'll just bleed right through this. This piece of bread actually might work really good to make toad in the hole, where you like put an egg in the toast. This might work really well. I might just cut out a little bit more so that the egg will fit, but I'm going to reserve these for later. So I'm going to go ahead and put them there. Get them back in the bag. And I know that just seems like you're getting a little bit particular about what slices of bread you're using for grilled cheese. And trust me, it makes a difference. When you're trying to cook that and all the cheese is melting through the middle, it's, number one, it's a pain to clean up. Number two, it doesn't actually make a good sandwich because you're missing like half the bread. So, you know, setting it aside, using it later for something else. I mean, I can make that toad in the hole tomorrow morning for breakfast. So let's start with the classic American cheese style grilled cheese. There's a couple of different ways you can get your bread toasted. One is softened butter. I like this method if I want a little bit of an extra nutty flavor, because the butter does give it a slight additional flavor. I just cut it super thin, and I spread it on fairly thin. The downside to this is butter, even when it's softened, doesn't spread very well. It kind of clumps up. One way around that is to actually just put the butter in the pan, just like a little slice of butter, and melt it. That gets it full coverage in the pan. And then when you put your bread in, press it down a little bit, and you'll get full coverage on the back end of the bread, and you'll get a nice even toast. So that's how we're going to do this first grilled cheese. Butter in the pan. I'm going to turn it on super low just to melt the butter. I don't want to start heating it up yet because butter burns pretty quickly, actually. So I really just want to melt it, get it coating on the bottom of the pan, and then just kind of leave it. This also makes it so that you can't easily put this piece of bread with the toasted side down on a cutting board, because then you're going to start getting butter or oil or whatever all over the cutting board. If you're doing something like this, works really well, because you can, you know, get the butter all over the bottom of the pan, your bread stays dry while you're waiting for it to kind of heat up, and you're good to go. We're also going to put our cheese on our bread while it's cold. When the bread goes into the pan, it's going to start cooking pretty much immediately, and it's going to toast up relatively quickly. The cheese needs enough time to melt. If the cheese is cold, I just pulled it out of the fridge, it's going to take a while to heat up to the point that it's going to start melting. The bread can very easily burn or cook a little bit too much, and then you have a ruined grilled cheese. I'm going to go ahead and just overlap a little bit, like less than 1/4 of an inch, on the edge of the bread. And what I'm going to do is overlap the cheese with itself as much as I need to. I like cheese, so I'm going to kind of leave it like that. Now, if I turn it around, I'm going to tend to overlap the cheese more on the curved side and try to get it so that I have that with a small overlap. This is a little bit more than 1/4 inch. That's fine. I don't care. However, on this side, I've got like 1 inch or 2 inches in the case of this diagonal. I am actually going to cut a straight line with the edge of the cheese, because all of this will melt and just make my pan gross, and I won't be able to cook another sandwich. I'll have to clean out the pan before I go and move on to the next sandwich. If you really want, you can trim the edges over here. You don't have to, though. A little bit of cheese is not a big deal. A huge amount of cheese like that melting into your pan, it's gonna make itself an issue. So we got our butter going over here. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this up to medium. I don't want it screaming hot. I actually would prefer to put my bread into a cold pan, again, to give the cheese a little bit of time to melt, than to put it into a super hot pan and scorch it before the cheese gets nice and melty. Again, I'm just going to make sure that I'm kind of overlapping on all of the edges. Then I'm going to set my bread into the pan and push it down just a bit. If you rub it around, you'll make sure that you get butter all over the bottom of that bread. If we take a quick peek, the entire bottom of this bread is buttered. And I didn't have to scrape all that bread away when I'm trying to get the butter applied. You can arrange your cheese on the bread if you want to, if it's like slid or, you know, moved around a bit. Then I'm going to take this side of my bread and get it right on top. and try to line it up as best I can. Now, ideally, I'll have something that I can put on top of this that's got a little bit more weight, maybe a small plate, maybe something a little bit heavier than that, just to make sure that it maintains contact while it's cooking. Go ahead and put my bread knife away. While I'm over here, I'm going to take a quick peek at my soup, which looks amazing. It is just kind of simmering away. Gentle simmer is what you want, and that's what I'm getting. Now, I am going to cheat a little because the spatula that I usually use is dirty and in the dishwasher, so I'm just going to use the this to flip my bread. But honestly, the top piece of bread shouldn't get too hot. You should be able to kind of take little peeks if you need to, see if your bread has been toasted enough or not. You should also use the cheese to kind of let you know once it's toasted, because it should start melting and folding. It doesn't have to melt completely. Remember, you've got another half of cheese that you're gonna, or a half of sandwich that you need to toast. But when it starts curling, you can start kind of peeking at the bread. If grilled cheeses are something that you really like to make, note what setting you have your dial at, because that's what you're going to want to come back to every time you cook it. I'm going to go ahead and put the butter away, because there's something else we're going to use for our second grilled cheese sandwich, and that's going to be our mayonnaise. Now, I made my own mayonnaise. It's super easy. It's just oil and one egg, and you just basically use a hand blender, and it just materializes out of nothing. You can feel free to YouTube search for some of those. And it tastes wonderful. It tastes better, in my opinion, than what you can get at the store. The store stuff is just as good. I mean, it's great. It's convenient. But if you can, why not? There we go. So my grilled cheese is about ready to flip. Nice toast on that. And while I'm waiting on the other side to toast, I'm going to go ahead and switch over here. I'm going to turn the heat down on that burner just a little bit. And I'm going to give my soup a stir. It is starting to thicken up a bit, mostly because of evaporation. But it's gently simmering, and that's exactly what I want. You don't want this to be going like full rolling boil. It's too much. Just a nice gentle simmer. And we're going to keep a look on this, keep an eye on this. The cheese is starting to melt, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Second side is getting toasted. Might need another minute. You can see that over here, that one corner is starting to kind of start touching the cooking surface. It's starting to bubble, but it's not the entire flap of cheese sitting on the griddle or on the pan, sticking to it or melting and making a mess. Just a little corner. And of course, any of the trimmings, you get to eat. I mean, you're the cook. There we go. Nice toasted second side. I'm going to press down on the one side that wasn't quite as toasted as the center, and just try to get a little bit of an even toast. But I'm not going to let it sit for too long, because I don't want to burn it. Yeah, a little bit better. That is our first grilled cheese sandwich. And I'm going to recommend turn off your pan when you're done cooking one, or if you're cooking two or three. After you're done with the first batch, turn off the pan. It's okay if it cools down a bit. You don't want this super hot because, again, you don't want to scorch your bread. Grilled cheese looks great. I made a mistake of taking my bread knife back to the cutting block, but I'll just use this. And listen to that crunch. There we go. Nice, melty, oozy grilled cheese sandwich. That cheese is just beautiful in there. That's what you want to see. It's had plenty of time to melt. It is wonderful. And then you just kind of have to figure out how you want to plate it. That would be fun, something like that. And we'll just set it over here for now. Let's do it like that because it's kind of tilting this way and I don't want it to fall over. Perfect. Let's work on our second grilled cheese. This was the one that we're going to use mayonnaise for. I'm just going to go ahead and use this knife. I want a super, super thin layer of mayonnaise. The mayonnaise doesn't add much flavor to the bread. That's not why I want a thin layer. It will, however, make the bread soggy if you add too much. Now, I've got my 2 pieces of bread here. I'm going to go ahead and open them up like this. And before I even get started with my bread, let's actually get our cheese grated. Excuse me, dog. Grab a cheese grater. We did this in our taco video. Always leave it horizontal, flat like this, because then you're not working against the side of it to try and get things grated. You're just moving things forward. You're letting gravity kind of do the work. And you won't need too much cheese for the second sandwich. And in fact, if you're making a grilled cheese sandwich after you've had a taco night, any of the leftover cheese from the taco night works wonderfully for this. Maybe a 1/4 cup of cheese. You generally need less cheese than you think. And I always overdo it on the cheese. Go ahead and set that there. Little pile of cheese. Got my dog at my feet eating up all the little bits that are falling onto the ground. You're a good dog. Yes, you are. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of mayonnaise to the back of this bread. Really, probably less than you think you need. You do want to get good, even coverage, but you don't want big gaping bits in the cracks. So if you got any that are kind of like falling into the cracks, scoop them out. Just make sure you get a nice, even, light layer of mayonnaise. This is going to be the bottom of my sandwich. I'm going to put it there. This is going to be the top. Now this always spreads perfectly, unlike butter. I don't care how soft you get butter. I've never gotten butter to work well. You can use margarine, but I just don't like margarine as kind of a general rule. Yep, I'm one of those people. So I'd rather use something a little bit more real, like actual butter or mayonnaise. Now, this still has some residual heat in it. I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Set my bread down. It's not sizzling, which means it's not cooking yet. It's not toasting. So I'm going to use a little bit of this time to add some of my cheese. And you really just want like a 1/4 inch layer on the 1 piece of bread because it's going to melt down. I'm going to reserve just a little bit of extra cheese here, because this is going to be one of those gourmet style sandwiches where we toast cheese on the outside too, because we're nuts. There we go. And we're going to take the second piece of bread and get it right on top. Then we're going to get this back on. And all this cheese right here, we're just going to reserve for now. That does bring up a good question, Allison. Hey, Hobbit, what kind of grilled cheese do you like when you make grilled cheese? What kind of cheese do you like in your sandwich? So in the case of this bread, it's a little bit long for this tiny pan. So I'm actually going to go out of my way to make sure that I push down the side that's kind of not touching, because I want to make sure that it all gets even contact so that it toasts evenly. And you can see in the pan, the little pieces of cheddar cheese that kind of fell in are starting to melt, which is good. That's what we want. And we're actually going to use those as kind of a gauge to see how done our bread is. When those start looking a little bit crispy, your bread is probably toasted well enough. Cheddar or Kraft singles? Yep, exactly. I love Kraft singles for grilled cheese. That being said, anything that's a good melty cheese works well. Sometimes I'll do a couple of slices or some shredded cheddar, maybe a little bit of Swiss, or I've even used brie. Brie works really well in a grilled cheese sandwich. Now again, some of those grilled cheese purists might not let you use brie without telling you that it's not technically a grilled cheese sandwich, but whatever. I also call any kind of white sparkling wine champagne, so because it is. All right, done with our mayonnaise. I'm starting to get a very light sizzle from my sandwich, which is perfect. And I'm starting to kind of look at the cheese here, which is starting to bubble a little bit. Don't know if you can see it on the camera. You can see these kind of little pieces over here. They're starting to bubble and almost crisp up. They're turning into almost like cheese croutons, which I love on like a salad. So we're actually going to do that to the outside of our sandwich here. And I like to just kind of spin my sandwich once because some of those little crispy bits will adhere to the edges. Let's take a quick peek. Not toasted yet, but the cheese is starting to melt, which is good. When you're testing the shredded cheese version of your grilled cheese sandwich or your toasted cheese sandwich, make sure you hold the top down well. Until this cheese is melted, it does like to tumble out of the inside of the sandwich. And I've had it in the past before where I've tilted to check and all of the cheeses come out into the skillet. Yeah. Not amazing. Didn't really hurt anything, but kind of had to start the sandwich over because I didn't have any cheese in it anymore. Cheddar and Gruyere. Oh, yeah, hell yes. Parmesan on the outside. Mm-hmm. To be determined if it's too rich. We're cleaning out our fridge. Absolutely. And you can mix Parmesan in. I don't know if you all did this. If I'm going to use a mix of cheese, what I'll do is if I'm going to shred it like this or if I'm going to grate it, is I will mix it all in one bowl and then I'll just sprinkle it all. If I'm going to use something like, if I'm going to do a crouton outside where I'm going to crisp up cheese on the outside of the bread, it might be a different mix of cheese than what's inside, depending on kind of what I'm going for. And I like experimenting. I love doing all kinds of different grilled cheese sandwiches. Never the same. All right, we're getting there, but not quite grilled yet. I'm actually going to turn up the heat just a bit on this. And the cheese on the inside is starting to get a little bit gooey and melty. And while I'm waiting on that, let's go check on our soup. Ooh, yeah, this looks wonderful. And there's a rice grain. Rice is cooked through. Not al dente or anything anymore, so this is actually pretty much ready for blending. But I'm going to let it keep simmering while we're doing our sandwich. Now, it's really up to you whether you want to do your sandwiches after you cook your soup. Totally up to you. In this case, since otherwise we would just be sitting here watching a boiling pot and doing nothing else, that's why I'm cooking them kind of while the soup is going. Because as I'm sure you've realized, this sandwich over here is probably going to be cold by the time we get to the soup. This one will probably still be warm because the soup will be ready by the time it's done cooking. But yeah, it's really up to you. There we go. A little bit toasty there. Now what I'll do is I'll just sprinkle a little bit of cheese on this side. You do not want to cover this whole thing with like an inch of cheese. You just want a very light amount, because when the cheese melts, it spreads quite a bit more than you think. And the great thing here is this surface is super hot, so by the time that other side browns, the cheese should have melted enough to at least get tacky to this side, so that when we flip it back over to toast up that cheese crouton, it won't, or most of it shouldn't, fall off. And if you want, you can kind of help it along by just kind of tapping it in. Just got to tap it in. Hey, Mom, how's it going? Oh, yeah, grilled brie cheese sounds amazing. It always works really well. In that case, I will scoop it. Like, if I'm eating like a thing of brie or like a baked brie, I just eat the rind with it. I mean, it doesn't taste like anything. It just, I just eat it. If I'm doing a grilled cheese, that's like the one time I'll actually scoop the cheese out and spread it onto the sandwich before making the sandwich, because then the rind becomes kind of a more of an inhibition. Like it's not something you want in the sandwich. But brie does make a wonderful sandwich. And of course, you can always peel off some of the crouton ends while it's cooking. Careful, because they can be hot. I'll give you a little preview. All right. And yeah, we're basically just waiting. You know what I can do? I'm actually going to switch back over to the soup. I'm going to blend it. You can blend this in an actual blender. Just be careful, because the soup is hot. So when you're pouring it into the blender, it can splatter everywhere. If you don't have a pot that's good for pouring, it can get a little awkward trying to get it into that blender thing. Maybe do it in the sink so that when you pour it, if anything splatters, it's in the sink. You might have a little bit of loss, but it's a little bit better than pouring it all over yourself or all over the counter. In my case, I happen to have a stand mixer. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the stand mixer to blend this. I'm going to turn the heat off while I blend it. And I'm just going to keep blending it until it's smooth. The color of the soup will change to almost a like orangey color, as opposed to a deep red. And I'll very, very slightly lift it to make sure that I'm getting all of the bits of the soup blended through. And this could take, a couple minutes, 5 minutes. Really depends on how smooth you want it. I like mine fairly smooth, so I'm going to blend it a little bit. And be careful when you're blending it too. Maybe I should have prefaced it before starting. If you lift it up too high, you can absolutely splatter soup all over yourself. Hopefully anybody who is watching did not accidentally do that on themselves. But just be careful. I'm going to go ahead and get the end of that in there. And I'm going to grab my spoon and just kind of start tasting. Haven't turned the heat back on, but number one, I want to make sure that it's smooth, so I'm going to run my spoon through it to see if it's a smooth soup or if there's still chunks in there. I'm going to give it a couple of tastes and adjust for seasoning, adding the sugar. This is 4 teaspoons of sugar. I'm going to start by adding half of it. Your tomatoes usually will need quite a bit of sugar. And then if you have a whisk available, that's a great way to get things mixed up. I don't, so I'm just using my spoon. Give it a good stir. and then give it a nice taste. It's actually pretty good. I think I'm actually going to leave it there with the sweetness. I think I'm going to add a little bit more salt. And that quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper is definitely coming out. Not a bad thing for me. I love a little bit of spice. And the last thing we're going to do while we're over here is actually check on our grilled cheese. That side is toasted as well. And now we've got the cheese down. So we're going to add the cheese, the rest of our cheese, to this other side. Again, you don't want to put a huge layer down. You just want a little bit of a sprinkling of cheese because it'll melt and spread out quite a bit. And while I'm letting that cook, I will actually just bring the soup over. And we'll get our cream into it. You want to add your cream once the soup is off of the heat. Otherwise, you can actually cook it quite a bit. And that might not turn into a flavor that you will enjoy. Again, a whisk would make this a lot quicker. But I'm just going to use my spatula. Scrape down the sides. And that is a beautiful tomato bisque soup. And our second grilled cheese is almost done here. I'm going to give it a quick taste. Oh yeah. Nice and hearty, really yummy. I'm going to set that right there. That's going to stay warm for quite a bit. I mean, it's a pretty big pot of soup. I would say that's 4 to 6 servings. I'm going to finish the grilled cheese. And while I'm waiting on this second side here, and by the way, you may have to pop the side off. There we go with our crouton. Look at that. Nice, crunchy, cheesy exterior. I'm going to go ahead and grab the plate and the bowl that we put in our oven to preheat out. Be careful because these are super hot, at least whatever you have your oven set to, 200 degrees in my case. So just be aware of that and treat them with respect. I'm going to go ahead and put the soup bowl there. My grilled cheese is going to go on a plate. Actually, you know what? Let's see if we can do a similar presentation to my first picture for this cook-along. That out of the way. Just move it over here. And side's not quite done yet. I'm going to go ahead and take my basil. I've got 2 leaves of basil here. I'm going to roll them up on top of each other like so. And this is called a chiffonade. I'm just going to, again, use the back of my finger as kind of a guide. And I'm just going to very, very finely slice my basil into ribbons. This will go into the soup. There we go. Set that right there. The other thing I'm going to do is grab my cream so we can make a really cool little soup design. Now we heated up our bowl and our plate. They do cool down fairly quickly, but they're still hot to the touch. Let's check on our sandwich. There we go. Get this off. There's our grilled cheese. We'll just go ahead and cut right through, like so. Got a beautiful grilled cheese sandwich here. Cheese on the inside is melted. It's got a nice crouton on the outside, nice and crispy. Let's go ahead and grab a ladle for our soup. Bring this over here and ladle it up. Nice and creamy. I am happy with the consistency of mine. If yours is too thick, you may want to add a little bit more water or stock just to kind of thin it out a bit. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. There we go. I know you don't get any soup right now. You're so angry. And we'll take our grilled cheese sandwich. Let's see if we can balance it on the edge of the plate here. Actually, before we do that, go ahead and grab our cream and our spoon. And what I like to do is just pour a little bit of a teaspoon of cream. And then I just get pretty close, start in the middle, just kind of dribble it, and then just go kind of out and around. And it takes like no time at all to do this, but it adds just a really kind of cool, creative flair to your soup. And then right on top of that, just a little bit of basil. Something like that. Beautiful tomato basil soup. And then we'll see if we can get our grilled cheese sandwich here to balance. Yeah. Almost, almost. There we go. Now, problem with this kind of a service is you can't really move it. As soon as you start moving it, this is all going to fall apart. There you go. I even just kind of touched the plate and the thing fell off. Makes for an awesome picture. Not super practical. So what you may want to do, set them on the sides like so. Deliver them that way. Your friends, family, whoever you're delivering them to will get to kind of see that. Or drop them off this way and then just before walking away, set them up like that and do the classic bon appetit and then walk away. But be careful because it doesn't quite hold up that well. In any case, let me go ahead and give this a taste, let you know what I think. And Allison and Drake, if you guys are done, let me know what you think of yours. The outside of this grilled cheese is nice and crunchy. Oh yeah. That is a good toasted cheese sandwich. Nice and cheddary, melty. And the great thing with a sourdough and shredding or shredding a cheddar is grating it down. All of those little nooks and crannies on the inside of the bread, the cheddar melts into them. So you get a little bit of cheese everywhere, which is fantastic. As for the tomato bisque, grab a little bit of basil with it. Yum. Yum, yum, yum. That's comfort food right there. Well, hopefully you give this a try if you weren't able to cook along live with us tonight. The ingredients are all available on the website, cookalong.live. Feel free to follow me on social channels. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. look for Cook Along Live. Most of them are cookalong.live as far as the account name. On YouTube, it's youtube.com/cookalonglive, all one word. And the website, cookalong.live. That's what the website address is. I put all of the ingredients and equipment lists on there during the week before the actual episode, and I also post the date of the next episode. So it may be a Sunday, it may be a Friday, it may be a Saturday. It kind of depends on the week. I will post on all of my avenues, all the channels that I'm on, what day that week it will be. And you will always find it on cookalong.live. There's an upcoming live streams link up at the top of the website you can click on. It'll show you everything that's coming up and what days that they're on. And of course, the ingredients list, the equipment lists, and all of that. And then those get posted to the main site once the episode's over. Hopefully you guys had a great time. Allison, what did you guys do? Toasting your grilled cheese now. Soup is delicious. Awesome. We'll send you a photo when we're done. Yes, please do. Can't wait to see it. Hope you guys had a great time cooking along with me. I love hosting these, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week on the next Cook Along Live. Have a good one, everybody. Good night.